Welcome to FCC Knows. Today we're going to talk about the main risk and benefit of therapy. So the big question is like, what are the risks and what are the benefits? I see them all as one. Like, we usually go over it in our informed consent. Right. Really, if you've never really gotten counseling, that's a risk because you're coming forward to talk about like all this stuff that if you watch past episodes, I refer to it as your storage unit. So it's been in the storage unit and now you have to unpack it. So I think the risk is if you have never had counseling, you're unsure, really. But the benefit is once you unpack all of that, now what do you have to do with it? But you've let it go. So you can leave. In my real life, I got Louis Vuitton bags. So I could leave all those Louis Vuitton bags and get some brand new ones and start over. But so that's to me like kind of in a sum of what the risk and benefits are.
Right.
How do you guys feel about that as far as...
I agree. A lot of times I'll tell my clients as well that the great part about coming to therapy is one, you said, okay, I want to take care of myself. So you were able to put yourself first for one. And then at that point, you were saying, I want to resolve all these things that's kind of been going on in my life or for however long. So, but like she said, with the risk that comes in a place of, what does that mean for my emotions? So I've had all these emotions put to the side in these bags, and now I'm about to start opening it up. What am I going to do through this process? So a lot of times I will share that your emotions may become more intense once you start to unravel these things. And I always let them know to tell me like, hey, if you're noticing this stuff is becoming a lot, I want to be a support for you. And we can start talking about some coping skills and relaxation techniques that you can utilize, because it is going to stir some stuff up. So that's really how I have the conversation. That's how I view the benefits and risks. They're kind of, like you said, hand in hand. But it gives you a chance to be able to work through it so it doesn't have to always be that risk for you.
Yeah. And I think like we talked about last time, the expectations that you bring in to like, it's probably a pretty healthy expectation that things are going to initially be intensified. Things will initially probably feel like maybe you actually feel more irritable. Maybe you actually have an increase in your anxiety. And the benefit of that is that you actually, like, the role of a therapist, is not only to hold those things and validate them, but being able to actually process through them. So you're going to have someone who's going to be able to reflect back to you, like, hey, I noticed that and that can be weird at first for people to notice. But yeah, like you're able to bring it to the table and look at it, and somebody else is again witnessing that with you, and you're really able to process through it, which becomes the benefit. Like then you're not holding it anymore. So
something that you said, Chrissy, made me think about when I'm during that whole intake session. I always talk to them about before we unpack our storage unit, that I'm gonna equip you with those coping skills and those things. But again, like from the last episode even, you have to do them. You can't just, because otherwise you're gonna, you'll feel it's more of a risk than a benefit, because you're like, I'm more irritable, I'm more, like you were saying, I'm more agitated, my depression's coming up more, but that is the risk of it. Like there might be more things that surface, but because you've been suppressing them, and now you feel a little bit free, and you're and you're like, I can come here every week or every 2 weeks or every month or however long and get it out in a non-judgmental way. But again, like y'all said, I'm always like, we got some tissue, we got whatever you need, and you're not alone. So I think that
and I think like sometimes people encounter, like, they've promised themselves, I'm not gonna cry. Like, I'm not gonna cry. And like, and then they come in and they're crying and they're like, why is this happening? What are you doing? And that's a great sign, actually. Like it's not a bad thing. Yet the problem is that, like, why did you feel like you had to make those promises to yourself to never cry? And so from my perspective as a therapist, it's all about your first relationships. And so when you go see a therapist, it's totally okay to ask them. They may not always be able to answer like what their theoretical approach is, but usually folks are coming from some sort of like theoretical background. And mine happens to be like based in more like attachment theory. So I always want to know, like some clients might be like, I came here to talk about my anxiety. Why are we talking about my parents? But a lot of times that can be a part of the initial rough spots in therapy, because maybe you're only used to people criticizing you, and so you're kind of expecting that as eventually from the therapist, and so so initially it can be weird to open up, which can intensify everything. Yet and being able to have that healthy attachment with a new person, that can create so much emotional healing. So it's like an emotional corrective experience. So,
Since you mentioned it, what do you have one as a? Because I don't think we ever said we're both like in the counselor part of it. So like we're striving to be professional counselors, while Chrissy is a licensed marriage and family therapist. So some of the approaches are different. So that's
True. And it's interesting because I know people will ask what's the difference for all these different types of things. What's the difference between a therapist, a counselor? I mean, a lot of times we utilize those interchangeably, but true, like she said, my background usually is centered with family systems. I'm really big on trying to go back to how were you raised? How did your parents talk about things? How did your parents express emotion? Because true, it's not that we're placing blame on parents. It's just the idea that at the end of the day, it gives us a root. It's a foundation of how we learn how to handle life, kind of. And whether we follow it truly or if we choose to say, I'm not going to be like them at all, and trying to find yourself being completely opposite, but realizing you did bring some of that stuff in. So I'm really big on familial pieces and feeling like an individual and their concerns, if there's other people around them, they're all in that process. So everybody's a part of that whole, every single piece that's there. So I'm really big on that. And that's why I like to work together with everybody that's involved. I'm very collaborative because of that piece for me. So
that's huge. That's great.
And I know mine, I think I'm more cognitive behavior therapy, but in reality, I tie in a lot of other things because cognitive behavior therapy, you get a lot of homework. I don't really give homework, but I do touch on those same things because you got to think about your family is what you've been around the most of the time, and they're the first people that have modeled some type of behavior for you. So if you see your parents fight and argue and that's how they communicate, that's how you learn to communicate. So then if you get into a relationship with somebody who doesn't fight and argue, you don't know how to deal with that because they're like, wait, I need a timeout. I'm doing this healthy. And you're just like, what is this? So that's another risk and benefit is that you're going to go through some change, but the environment that you're in, they're still probably wherever they were. Especially like, I know when I used to do substance abuse counseling, that was a lot of the issue is like going back to that same environment and then people not, it's like, how can you adjust to this? And then people are treating you differently because you've changed, but they're still wanting that same other person, or they're used to that same other person, that other you, but you're in a healthier space. So.
And like attachment theory is a part of what I like to work with clients with, but then also like their story, like more of the narrative. And so one of the benefits is that if we can get through that initial, like, this is how you've read your story up until this point, then we can start to re-author it. But first we have to go through that, like, this is the story that I know, and then recreating that story. So,
all the time. That's what it is. And like they were saying too, I think that you brought that up. I feel that's big when it comes to children. If you do have children, if you're noticing behavioral issues, things like that, it's really big for everyone in the household to be involved in that process, because how this children responds is going to dictate how you respond and vice versa. So if the parents can change some things, the children can. So I'm really big on the family pieces, and like you said, getting the chance to re-author that story. I love narrative.
I like that. Whenever you came back from that training, can I say it? That, from the Allender Center training, and you were all so big on the story thing, I was like, story. That makes sense because your life is your story. And the thing is that we're the author, and we forget, like you said, we forget that I can change my narrative. It doesn't have to be this way. So I always love that. came to us with all of that, and it's been really helpful and knowledgeable for us, you know. So I'm glad you went.
Me too.
So do you guys have any risk or benefits that you would like to know about, or just comment and share, and we'll try to reply to them.
Right.
You know. But again, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for next week and see another episode. Don't forget to
like
and subscribe.
Share. Thanks for watching.